New Year's Eve, the most exclusive restaurant in Manhattan. And Rachel Carter, billionaire CEO, face of Fortune's cover 3 times running, was being told there was no table for her. "I'm sorry, ma'am, we're fully booked." Around her, champagne glasses clinked, couples embraced, families laughed. Everyone had somewhere to be someone to hold. She turned toward the exit when a movement caught her eye. A black man at a corner table near the window rose from his seat. Beside him, a little girl with braided hair looked up. He met Rachel's gaze and waved her over. A stranger, inviting her to stay. 3 hours earlier, Rachel Carter had been on a conference call with investors in Singapore, London, and Sao Paulo simultaneously. She had closed a $2 billion acquisition without raising her voice. Her name commanded respect in boardrooms across 4 continents. Now she stood in the lobby of La Maison Elise, Manhattan's most coveted dining destination, being told that none of that mattered. "Perhaps you didn't hear me," Rachel said, keeping her voice measured. "I'll pay triple the price. 4 times. Name your number." The maitre d', a slender man with silver temples and an apologetic smile, shook his head. "I understand, Ms. Carter, and I truly wish I could accommodate you, but every table is reserved. It's New Year's Eve." She knew that. Of course she knew that. What she hadn't anticipated was that the restaurant where she'd hosted countless business dinners, where the staff knew her preferences down to the exact temperature of her sparkling water, would have no room for her on the one night she came alone. Her assistant Rachel had left early to catch a flight home to Chicago. Her driver had requested the holiday off weeks ago, and Rachel had approved it without thinking. She had a penthouse with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, a wine collection worth more than most people's homes, and not a single person expecting her anywhere. So she had driven herself here. For the first time in years, she had gotten behind the wheel of her own car, a sleek black Mercedes she barely remembered purchasing, and navigated through holiday traffic like any ordinary person. She had told herself it was an adventure, a change of pace. She had not told herself it was loneliness. That word did not exist in her vocabulary. "I see," Rachel said to the maitre d'. Her reflection stared back at her from the polished marble walls. Immaculate makeup, a charcoal cashmere coat that cost more than most monthly salaries, perfect posture. "Thank you for your time." She turned and walked toward the exit, her heels clicking against the floor with measured precision. Around her, the restaurant hummed with life. A couple in their 60s held hands across a candlelit table. A young family with 2 children laughed over shared plates of pasta. A group of friends raised glasses in a toast, their faces bright with the promise of midnight. She was surrounded by warmth, yet utterly alone. The thought surfaced unbidden, and Rachel pushed it down with practiced efficiency. She had built a company from nothing. She had graced the cover of Forbes, Fortune, and Time. She answered to no one, needed no one. And yet, when she reached the door, she allowed herself one final glance back. A mistake. Because that was when she saw him. Carlos Brooks had not planned to come here tonight. 3 years ago, this restaurant had been his and Naomi's place. Not for regular dinners, they couldn't afford that, but for the moments that mattered. Their 5th anniversary. The night they found out she was pregnant with Sophia. New Year's Eve, when they would dress up, splurge on the tasting menu, and pretend for one evening that they were the kind of people who did this all the time. The last time they'd been here together, Naomi had been in remission. They had celebrated with champagne and hope, believing the worst was behind them. 4 months later, she was gone. He had avoided this place ever since. Too many ghosts, too much of her in every corner. But Sophia had asked. His 7-year-old daughter, who remembered her mother only in fragments, a laugh, a lullaby. The smell of lavender lotion had looked up at him last week with those big brown eyes and said, "Daddy, can we go to Mommy's special restaurant so she knows we still remember?" How could he say no? So here they were, seated at a corner table near the window, the same spot where he and Naomi had always sat. Sophia wore her favorite purple dress, the one with tiny silver stars. In her lap, she held a drawing she'd made that afternoon, 3 stick figures holding hands. Carlos on the left, Sophia in the middle, and Naomi floating on a cloud above them, a halo of yellow crayon around her head. "Daddy, look," Sophia said, pointing across the room. "That lady is sad." Carlos followed his daughter's gaze. Near the entrance, a woman in an expensive coat was speaking with the maitre d'. Even from a distance, he could read the tension in her shoulders, the careful control in her expression. He recognized her vaguely, one of those faces you saw on magazine covers at the grocery store checkout. "Maybe she's just tired, sweetheart." Sophia shook her head, her braids swinging. "No, she's sad. Like the kind of sad where you smile but your eyes don't." Carlos watched the woman turn and walk toward the door. Her posture was perfect, her stride confident, but Sophia was right. There was something hollow in the way she moved, something familiar. He knew that walk. He'd perfected it himself in the months after Naomi died. The appearance of composure when everything inside was crumbling. "She doesn't have anyone," Sophia said softly. "Nobody's waiting for her." The words hit Carlos harder than they should have. He looked at the empty chair beside him, the one he still couldn't bring himself to fill, and then back at the woman retreating toward the cold Manhattan night. Naomi would have done something. His wife had never been able to walk past someone in need without stopping. She used to joke that her heart had no off switch. Before he could overthink it, Carlos stood up. Rachel's hand was on the door when she heard it, a small voice cutting through the ambient noise. "Excuse me, lady." She turned. The little girl with braided hair was waving at her, standing on her chair to be seen above the crowd. Beside her, the man Rachel had noticed earlier was on his feet, one hand resting gently on his daughter's shoulder. "We have an extra chair," the girl called out. "You can sit with us." The maitre d' looked mortified. "Ms. Carter, I'm so sorry, I can ask them to—" "No," Rachel heard herself say. "It's fine." She didn't know why she said it. Every instinct told her to decline gracefully and leave. She was Rachel Carter. She did not accept charity from strangers. She did not sit at other people's tables like some lost soul in need of rescue. But the little girl was still smiling at her. And the man, her father, clearly had an expression that held no pity. No recognition of who Rachel was or what she was worth. Just a quiet steadiness, as if he understood something about her that she hadn't said aloud. She walked toward their table. "I'm Carlos," the man said, extending his hand. His grip was warm and firm. "This is my daughter, Sophia." "I'm 7, Sophia announced. "And you're really pretty. Are you a princess?" Despite herself, Rachel felt her lips curve into something approaching a smile. "No, I'm not a princess." "That's okay. Princesses are boring anyway. They just wait in towers. You look like someone who does stuff." Carlos pulled out the chair across from him. "Please, sit." Rachel hesitated. She could still leave. She could thank them politely, make an excuse, and walk out into the night where no one would see her vulnerability. She could go home to her empty penthouse and pour herself a glass of wine and pretend this evening never happened. Or she could sit down. She thought of the conference call earlier, the billions of dollars, the investors hanging on her every word. She thought of her assistant flying home to a family that missed her, her driver spending the holiday with people who loved him. She thought of every New Year's Eve for the past decade spent at parties where everyone wanted something from her, where she was never just Rachel, but always the CEO, the billionaire, the brand. She sat down. "Thank you," she said. The words felt strange in her mouth. When was the last time she had thanked someone and truly meant it? Sophia beamed. Carlos nodded, then turned to flag down a waiter. "Another menu, please." And just like that, Rachel Carter, who controlled boardrooms and commanded empires, found herself at a tiny table with a stranger and his 7-year-old daughter with no agenda, no power, no role to play. For the first time in longer than she could remember, she had no idea what came next. The realization should have terrified her. Instead, something in her chest loosened. Just a little, just enough to breathe. The dinner that followed was unlike anything Rachel had experienced in years. She was accustomed to meals as transactions. Every lunch, every dinner, every glass of wine shared across a table came with an agenda. Investors wanted access. Competitors wanted information. Everyone wanted something. But Carlos asked her nothing about her company. He didn't mention her net worth or her latest acquisition. When Sophia inquired what Rachel did for work, Carlos simply said, "She helps run a big business," and left it at that. Instead, they talked about small things. Sophia's favorite subject in school art because math was too bossy with all its rules. The snow that was supposed to fall before midnight. The best flavor of ice cream. Sophia insisted on strawberry. Carlos argued for butter pecan. Rachel admitted she couldn't remember the last time she'd had ice cream at all. "That's the saddest thing I ever heard," Sophia declared, her eyes wide. "Daddy, we have to fix this." Carlos smiled, the first real smile Rachel had seen from him. It transformed his face, softened the careful reserve he wore like armor. "Maybe we can get dessert later." Rachel found herself watching them, studying the easy rhythm of their interactions. The way Carlos cut Sophia's food into smaller pieces without being asked. The way Sophia reached for his hand when she laughed, as if joy was something meant to be shared through touch. The way he listened when she spoke, giving her his full attention, like her 7-year-old observations mattered as much as any boardroom presentation. This was what family looked like. Not the cold silence of her childhood where achievements were expected and affection was rationed. Not the performative warmth of holiday parties where everyone smiled for cameras and went home to separate lives. This was real. "You're staring," Sophia said, suddenly catching Rachel off guard. "Do I have food on my face?" "No, I'm sorry, I was just thinking." "About what?" Rachel searched for an answer that wouldn't sound strange to a child. "About how nice this is, having dinner with you." The girl beamed. "See, Daddy, I told you she was nice. You were worried for nothing." Carlos's expression flickered with something Rachel couldn't quite read. "I wasn't worried. You made your serious face when she sat down, the one you make when you're thinking too hard." "Sophia." There was gentle warning in his voice, but also amusement. "It's okay," Rachel said. "I would be cautious too if a stranger joined my table." She met Carlos's eyes. "Thank you for letting me stay. You didn't have to do that." Carlos held her gaze for a moment. "Everyone deserves somewhere to be on New Year's Eve." The words were simple, but they landed somewhere deep in Rachel's chest. Before she could respond, Sophia tugged on her sleeve. "Do you have pets?" "I want a dog, but Daddy says our apartment is too small." "Do you have a big apartment you could get a really big dog? Like one of those fluffy ones that look like clouds?" Rachel almost laughed. "I don't have any pets." "Why not?" "I travel a lot for work. I wouldn't have time to take care of them properly." Sophia considered this with the gravity of a Supreme Court justice weighing evidence. "That's sad. But at least you're honest about it. Some people get pets and then ignore them, and that's worse." "Sophia has very strong opinions about responsibility," Carlos said dryly. "Someone has to," the girl replied. Then she turned back to Rachel with a new question. "What's your favorite color?" Rachel blinked. No one had asked her that in decades. "Ocean blue," she said finally. "The color of the sea on a calm day." "That's pretty. Mine is purple, obviously." Sophia gestured at her dress. Then her expression grew thoughtful. "Do you cry a lot?" "Sophia," Carlos said, his tone sharper now. "That's personal." "It's okay." Rachel looked at the little girl, at her open, curious face, and felt something crack inside her. "No, I don't cry much. Sometimes I want to, but I can't." Sophia nodded solemnly. "Mommy used to say that grown-ups who don't cry are holding their sadness inside. She said if you don't let it out, it stays stuck in your chest forever." Carlos's jaw tightened, and Rachel saw him look away. But Sophia continued matter of fact. "Mommy cried sometimes. She said it was like rain for the heart. It washes things clean." Rachel didn't know what to say. She looked at Carlos, at the grief still visible in the lines around his eyes, and then back at this remarkable child who spoke about her dead mother with such simple wisdom. "Your mother sounds like she was very wise," Rachel said softly. "She was," Carlos said, his voice quiet. "She really was." When midnight came, the restaurant erupted in cheers. Champagne corks popped. Strangers embraced. Somewhere, a jazz band played the opening notes of Auld Lang Syne. Sophia stood on her chair and threw her arms around Carlos's neck. "Happy New Year, Daddy!" He held her tight. His eyes closed, and Rachel saw something raw flash across his face. Grief and love tangled together so tightly they had become the same thing. Then Sophia turned to her. "Happy New Year, Miss Rachel?" Before Rachel could react, small arms wrapped around her shoulders. The hug was brief and fierce, the way only children hug, without reservation, without calculation. When Sophia pulled back, Rachel's throat felt tight. "Happy New Year," she managed. Carlos extended his hand across the table. "Happy New Year, Rachel." She took it. His palm was warm, his grip steady. And for one suspended moment as the old year died and the new one began, Rachel Carter felt something she hadn't felt in decades. Hope. She told herself it was a one-time thing, a strange, beautiful accident that couldn't happen again. But 3 days into January, she found herself walking through Central Park on her lunch break, something she never did. And there they were. Carlos pushing Sophia on a swing, both of them bundled against the cold, their laughter carrying across the frozen air. Sophia spotted her first. "Miss Rachel?" There was no graceful way to pretend she hadn't seen them. And if she was being honest with herself, something she was trying to do more often, she didn't want to. "Hello, Sophia, Carlos." He looked surprised, but not displeased. "Out for a walk?" "Apparently." She gestured vaguely at the park around them. "I don't do this often." "You should. Fresh air is good for the soul." "Come push me." Sophia jumped off the swing. "Daddy's arms are getting tired." And somehow Rachel, who had meetings to attend and emails to answer and an empire to run, spent the next hour in a playground pushing a 7-year-old on a swing and learning the proper technique for building a snowball. It became a pattern. Coffee runs that accidentally coincided with Carlos's schedule. Weekend afternoons at the park when Sophia had no school. Dinners that started as casual and became something Rachel looked forward to all week. She learned things about him in pieces. That he worked as an education consultant for community programs, helping at-risk youth find paths to college and careers. That he'd met Naomi in graduate school when they were both broke and idealistic, and certain they could change the world. That after she died, he'd considered moving back to Atlanta where his mother lived, but Sophia had begged to stay in the city where her memories of Mommy still lived. He didn't ask much about Rachel's past, but he listened when she offered fragments. The childhood in Connecticut, all manicured lawns and absent parents. The company she'd built from a small tech startup into a global giant. The way success had become a kind of trap golden handcuffs she'd fastened around her own wrists. "Do you regret it?" he asked one evening as Sophia napped on his couch and they sat in his small kitchen drinking tea. "Building what you built." Rachel considered the question. "I regret what it cost me, but I don't know if I could have been anyone else." Carlos nodded slowly. "I used to think that about grief. That it had to consume everything. That there was no room for anything else. And now..." He looked toward the living room where Sophia's sleeping form was visible, her arm around a stuffed elephant. "Now I think maybe there's room. If I'm brave enough to make it." The first time Rachel overstepped, she didn't even realize she was doing it. Sophia had mentioned wanting art supplies, the really good kind, not the ones from the regular store. That weekend, Rachel showed up at Carlos's apartment with a professional grade set worth over $500. Brushes made from imported sable hair. Pigments used by gallery artists. A wooden case with brass hinges. Sophia's eyes went wide. "For me, every artist needs proper tools," Rachel said, pleased with herself. But Carlos's expression had gone carefully neutral. "That's very generous, Rachel. Sophia, what do you say?" "Thank you, thank you, thank you." Sophia threw her arms around Rachel's waist, then immediately began examining each brush like it was a sacred artifact. Later, when Sophia was absorbed in her new treasures, Carlos pulled Rachel aside. "You didn't have to do that. I wanted to. She mentioned wanting better supplies and I happened to know a place." "Rachel." His voice was gentle but firm. "That set costs more than my grocery budget for 2 months. I looked it up." She blinked. "I didn't think about the price. I just wanted her to have something nice." "I know. And I appreciate the intention, but Sophia doesn't need expensive things. She needs consistency, presence, things that can't be bought." The words stung more than they should have. Rachel nodded stiffly. "Of course, I'm sorry." Carlos softened. "I'm not angry. Just, let's keep things simple, okay? We're not a project to be funded. We're just people." She agreed. She meant it. But old habits were harder to break than she'd anticipated. When Carlos mentioned that funding for one of his community programs had been cut, Rachel casually offered to cover the shortfall. When Sophia's school sent home a flyer about an elite art camp, Rachel researched the application process and started drafting a recommendation letter. When Carlos's laptop died mid-project, a new one arrived at his door the next day with a note that said, "Just returning the favor for New Year's Eve." Each gesture came from a good place. Each one pushed Carlos further away. "I can't accept this," he said, standing in his doorway with the laptop box still sealed. "Rachel, this is a $3,000 computer. It's a tool for your work. You help kids find futures. You shouldn't be held back by outdated equipment. That's not the point. His jaw tightened. The point is that I didn't ask for this. I don't need you to solve my problems. I'm not trying to solve anything. I just want to help. Help! The word came out flat. Every time you help, it feels like you're trying to fix us. Like we're broken and you're the one with the tools. Rachel felt heat rise to her cheeks. That's not fair. I care about you, both of you. Then care about us by being here. Not by writing checks or sending gifts or pulling strings. Carlos ran a hand over his face, exhaustion replacing anger. I've spent my whole life proving I don't need handouts. I've worked for everything I have. When you swoop in with your money and your connections, it makes me feel like none of that matters. Like I'm not enough on my own. The silence between them stretched tight as a wire. I didn't know, Rachel said quietly. I didn't think about how it would feel to you. I only thought about what I could give. Carlos's expression shifted. Something like sympathy or maybe recognition. I know, but that's the problem. You're so used to giving things that you don't know how to just be. She had no response to that, because he was right. Rachel tried to change. She stopped offering money, stopped buying gifts, stopped solving problems that weren't hers to solve. She learned to sit with Sophia and simply color without suggesting better techniques or premium paper. She learned to listen to Carlos talk about his work without proposing funding solutions or corporate partnerships. It was harder than any negotiation she'd ever conducted. Every instinct screamed at her to contribute to add value to justify her presence with tangible offerings. Sitting still felt like failure, but slowly something shifted. One evening, Carlos looked at her across his kitchen table. The same table where they'd shared a dozen meals by now, and said, "This is nice, just this." And Rachel realized that for the first time in her life, she was learning that being present was enough. The photo appeared on a gossip site in early March. Rachel and Carlos at the park. Sophia between them, all three laughing at something off camera. The headline read, "Tech Billionaire's Secret Romance, Rachel Carter Spotted with Mystery Man and Child." The comments were predictable. Speculation about who Carlos was, whether the child was Rachel's, whether this was a scandal in the making. A few threads turned ugly, questioning why a woman like Rachel would be seen with a black man from Brooklyn using language that made her stomach turn. She had her PR team scrub the article within hours. Threatened legal action against the photographer. But the damage was already done. Carlos withdrew. Not dramatically, he still responded to her texts, still agreed to see her, but something had shifted behind his eyes. A wariness that hadn't been there before. "I don't want Sophia dragged into your world," he said one night after the little girl had gone to bed. "She's been through enough. I know, I'm handling it. You can't handle everything, Rachel. That's what I'm trying to tell you. Some things just have to be weathered." She wanted to argue, wanted to explain that she could protect them, that her resources and influence could build walls around this fragile thing they were creating. But she saw the look on his face and held her tongue. For once she listened instead of acted. It wasn't enough. The school called Carlos in April. Sophia's application for a prestigious art scholarship, one he'd never submitted, had been flagged for review. The admissions director wanted to discuss the glowing recommendation letter that had accompanied it. A letter signed by Rachel Carter. Carlos called her that night. His voice was ice. "You went behind my back. I was trying to help. The school has the best art program in the city and Sophia has so much talent. I said no. I told you I didn't want your connections involved in her education. You agreed. You looked me in the eye and agreed. I know, but I thought if you just saw what was possible, you thought you knew better." The words were sharp as broken glass. "That's what this is really about, isn't it? You think your money, your influence gives you the right to make decisions for us? Like we're children who don't know what's good for us." "Carlos, please, let me explain." "Explain what?" "That you can't help yourself. That old habits die hard." His laugh was bitter. "I've heard that before. From people who always thought they knew better than the single black father from Brooklyn. I expected it from them, not from you." Rachel felt tears prick her eyes. When had she last cried? She couldn't remember. "I made a mistake. A terrible mistake. But I did it because I care." "That's the worst part." His voice cracked. "I know you care, but caring isn't enough if you can't respect boundaries. If you can't trust me to know what's right for my own daughter." The silence stretched between them, vast as an ocean. "I need time," Carlos finally said. "And I need you to stay away from Sophia. She's already asking about you. She doesn't understand why you've been coming around, and I don't want her hurt worse when—" He stopped, started again. "Just give us space. Please." The line went dead. Rachel sat in her penthouse, surrounded by everything money could buy, and felt the foundation of something precious crumble beneath her feet. She had done this. With the best intentions in the world, she had done exactly what she'd always done. Tried to control, tried to fix, tried to prove her worth through action rather than simply being. And now the only people who had seen her as more than a CEO, more than a brand, were slipping away. The irony was not lost on her. She had built a career on understanding what people needed, on anticipating problems and solving them before they escalated. But when it came to the thing that mattered most, genuine human connection, she had failed in the most fundamental way possible. She had treated love like a transaction, and now she was paying the price. The weeks that followed were the longest of Rachel's life. She did not call Carlos, did not text, did not drive past his Brooklyn apartment or show up at the park where Sophia liked to swing. He had asked for space, and for once in her life, she would give someone exactly what they asked for instead of what she thought they needed. But the silence was deafening. She threw herself into work the way she always had when life became too complicated to bear. Board meetings, acquisitions, the endless machinery of empire. Her executives noticed nothing different. Her shareholders saw the same decisive leader they'd always trusted. The mask held. At night, though, the questions came. If she couldn't use her money, her connections, her ability to solve problems, what was left? Who was Rachel Carter without the power to fix things? She had built her entire identity around being useful, around being the one with answers. Strip that away, and what remained? The question haunted her through sleepless nights and distracted days. And slowly, painfully, an answer began to form. She started volunteering. Not at Carlos's community programs. She would not insert herself into his world uninvited. Instead, she found a youth literacy center in Queens, a struggling organization with outdated books and dedicated staff who couldn't afford to pay themselves living wages. She showed up on a Tuesday evening wearing jeans and a sweater instead of her usual designer armor and asked if they needed help. The director, a tired woman named Martha, who had clearly never heard of Rachel Carter, handed her a stack of picture books and pointed toward a circle of fidgeting 6-year-olds. "Read to them, keep them engaged, good luck. No strategic planning, no funding proposals. Just a plastic chair, a worn copy of Where the Wild Things Are, and 8 pairs of skeptical eyes." Rachel was terrible at it. She read too fast. She forgot to show the pictures. She didn't know how to do funny voices. One boy fell asleep. A girl with pink barrettes informed her that the last volunteer was way better at this. But she came back the next week, and the week after that. She learned to slow down, to let the children interrupt with questions, to laugh when she mispronounced words and let them correct her. She learned that showing up was its own kind of gift, one that couldn't be outsourced or purchased. She learned finally what Carlos had been trying to tell her all along. Carlos saw the change before he was ready to acknowledge it. A mutual acquaintance mentioned spotting Rachel at the literacy center. A colleague shared an article about how the tech billionaire had been quietly volunteering for months without any press coverage or tax-deductible fanfare. He told himself it didn't matter. People didn't change. Not really. But Sophia wouldn't let him forget. "When is Miss Rachel coming back?" she asked at breakfast. "Is Miss Rachel mad at me?" she wondered at dinner. "I want to show Miss Rachel my new painting," she announced at bedtime, holding up a watercolor of a sunset that she'd made with the expensive brushes still sitting in their wooden case. Carlos didn't know how to explain adult complications to a 7-year-old. He tried saying that sometimes friends need time apart. Sophia asked why. He tried saying that grown-ups make mistakes. Sophia asked if mistakes meant you couldn't be friends anymore. He had no good answer. One night in September, as Carlos tucked her into bed, Sophia handed him a new drawing. He looked at it and felt his breath catch. 4 figures this time. Carlos on the left, tall and steady. Sophia in the middle, grinning in purple crayon. Naomi floating on a cloud above them, the same yellow halo she always drew. And beside Carlos, holding his hand, stood a woman with brown hair and a blue dress. "That's Miss Rachel," Sophia said, pointing. "I put her next to you because she makes you smile. And Mommy's on the cloud so she can see that we're happy." Carlos stared at the drawing. His daughter had seen something he'd been refusing to admit, that his resistance wasn't just about protecting Sophia. It was about protecting himself. From hope. From the possibility of losing someone again. "Daddy." Sophia's voice was small. "Mommy would want you to be happy, right?" He pulled her into a hug, blinking hard. "Yeah, baby, she would." That night after Sophia was asleep, Carlos sat alone in the kitchen with the drawing spread before him. He thought about Naomi, really thought about her, not just the grief he'd wrapped around her memory like a shield. She had loved fiercely and forgiven freely. She had believed that people deserved second chances. She had told him once near the end that her only fear wasn't dying. It was that he would stop living. He had promised her he wouldn't, but he had. For 3 years, he had hidden behind his role as Sophia's protector, convinced himself that keeping everyone at arm's length was the same as keeping his daughter safe. He had turned Naomi's memory into a wall instead of a window. Rachel had made mistakes, real ones. But she was trying to change, not to win him back, but because she'd finally understood something true about herself. He had watched her stumble toward that truth with the same determination she probably brought to boardrooms. It wasn't graceful. It wasn't perfect. But it was real. The letter arrived on the gray October morning. Carlos recognized the handwriting on the envelope, precise, elegant, unmistakably hers. He considered throwing it away unopened. Instead, he sat down at the kitchen table and read, "Carlos, I'm not writing to ask for another chance. I know I don't deserve one, and even if I did, that's not mine to ask for. I just wanted you to know that you were right. About everything. I spent my whole life believing that my worth came from what I could give money, solutions, success. You showed me that presence matters more than presence, that listening is harder than fixing, that love isn't a transaction. I'm still learning. I volunteer now at a literacy center in Queens. The kids there don't care that I'm a CEO. They care whether I remember to do the funny voices. It's humbling in the best possible way. Thank you for New Year's Eve. Thank you for letting me sit at your table when I had nowhere else to go. Thank you for showing me what family looks like. I will carry that gift with me always. Whatever happens, I hope you and Sophia find everything you deserve. Rachel." Carlos read the letter 3 times. Then he folded it carefully, placed it in his desk drawer, and did nothing. But he found himself thinking about her at odd moments, wondering if she was still reading to those kids, hoping she had learned to do the voices right. He called her in November. She didn't answer, so he left a message. "Rachel, it's Carlos. I got your letter. I'm not ready to... I don't know what I'm ready for, but Sophia asks about you, and I don't want her growing up thinking that people can't change or that mistakes are permanent. So maybe we could talk. Just talk. No promises." She called back the next day. They met for coffee at a neutral location, not their park, not their restaurant. Just 2 people sitting across a small table trying to find their way back to honesty. "I'm not the same person I was in April," Rachel said. "I know that sounds like something people say, but I've been doing the work, real work, the kind that doesn't show up on a balance sheet." Carlos nodded slowly. "I've been doing some work too, realizing that I was using my grief as an excuse to keep everyone out, including people who might be worth letting in. They didn't solve everything that day, but they started." 1 year later, New Year's Eve returned. No exclusive Manhattan restaurant this time. No velvet ropes or champagne towers. Just Carlos's small Brooklyn apartment, the same one where Rachel had once dropped off a laptop she shouldn't have bought. Sophia sprawled on the living room floor with her watercolors working on a painting she refused to let anyone see until it was finished. Carlos stood at the stove, stirring a pot of soup that had been his mother's recipe. And Rachel set the table. She was clumsy at it. The forks ended up on the wrong side. The napkins were folded unevenly. But she was there doing something small and ordinary, and nobody was keeping score. On the shelf behind the couch, a framed photograph of Naomi smiled at the room. Rachel had asked Carlos about it once early in their reconciliation, whether it bothered him having her picture there while Rachel was present. "She's part of this family," he had said simply. "She always will be. You're not replacing anyone, you're just adding to the story." Now, as the clock ticked toward midnight, Sophia abandoned her painting and scrambled onto the couch between them. 10:98. Carlos reached for Rachel's hand. She took it. 7:65. Outside, fireworks began to crackle over the city. Inside, the apartment glowed warm and golden. 4, 3, 2, 1, Happy New Year. Sophia threw her arms around both of them at once, pulling them into a messy, laughing embrace. And Rachel Carter, who had spent decades measuring her worth in acquisitions and headlines and the cold certainty of control, felt something she had never expected to find. Enough. Not because she had earned it, not because she had bought it, but because she had finally learned to simply be present, imperfect, and uncertain in a room with people who accepted her anyway. She didn't know what the new year would bring. She didn't know if this fragile, precious thing would last a month or a lifetime. But for the first time, she didn't need to know. She just needed to be here. And she was.